Hello and welcome back to Tata Literature Live. For everyone who has just tuned in, we are proud to present the 11th annual Mumbai International Litfest, completely digital for the first time ever, co-sponsored by Tata Steel and Tata Projects. And this particular session is brought to you by Akshara Foundation, Mumbai. We have all grown up with tales from the Mahabharata. Arjun and the eye of the fish, Karan and his armor of gold, Draupadi and her vow for vengeance. But the Mahabharata has a whole host of characters who contribute in a big and in small ways to rich narrative of the world's longest epic poem. Today we have with us Arshia Sattar, a teacher of classical Indian literature and one of the most renowned scholars of the Indian epics. Arshia has a PhD in South Asian languages and civilizations from the University of Chicago. She is here to share with us her latest work, Mahabharata for Children. Could I request Festival Director Mr. Anil Dharkar to officially launch Dr. Arshia Sattar's book, Mahabharata for Children?
With great pleasure. Out of my bag of tricks, I bring out Arshia's Mahabharat for Children. Congratulations, Arshia.
Thank you, Tata.
This is going to be my present for my granddaughter in London.
Oh, lovely. Lovely.
All the best. All the best for the session.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Joining us on the digital panel with Dr. Sattar is a young art enthusiast, animal lover and budding footballer, Tariecka Sinh. There will be a 5-minute Q&A at the end of the session, so please do send in your questions in the comment box and don't forget to put in your name and age. Over to our lovely speakers.
Hi Arshia, I'm really happy to be with you today, and hello to all of you guys watching. And as you all know, this session is about the lesser known characters of the Mahabharata, but who knows, if this discussion gets interesting, we could talk a whole lot more. So the story of the Mahabharata is very dark and twisted in some ways, but it's also about family and love and loyalty as well, which I think are very important lessons for children, especially of my age. So congratulations on the book. The life lessons I've learned from reading this book have really given me an insight as to how it was back then. And while reading the book, I keep trying to find relations to times today. And I think it's very important for us to learn about Indian mythology. And I thought your book on the Mahabharata was really insightful. So, Arshia, should we just dive right into the questions?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, my first question to you is, was it difficult to write a book for children, seeing as to how dark and twisted Mahabharata is? And do you feel children would understand it?
I think children are really smart. And I think children really do have the capacity to think for themselves. And I think it's adults who need to learn that that is true. I feel very, very strongly that, like adults, children also read for pleasure. Yeah? So this business about, and because I do books on Hindu mythology, Ramayana, and Mahabharata, and this other collection of myths, people are always asking me, what do you want children to learn? What is your message? What are you teaching? And I'm like, you know what? I just want them to read the story, right? And they're going to have questions that I cannot anticipate. They're going to have questions that I never thought of. So it's a little hard for me to, say that I'm teaching when in fact I'm sharing my own love for these stories, and I'm sharing the pleasure that I get in writing them. And, I hope you have the same pleasure in reading them. And is it difficult to tell stories for children? Yes and no. The part that you have to be aware of is that you need to use a more limited vocabulary. That's important. But it's equally important to remember that you don't have to use limited ideas. That children, I prefer the word younger readers. When I think of children, I think they're 6 years old. People like yourself are young readers. So I'm sure that you can follow any story that I'm telling. I'm sure that your imagination is equal to, if not bigger than mine. So when I write for children, I keep in mind that it's very important not to talk down to them. It's very important to treat them like equals, not adults, but equals. Yeah. And the other hard part, of course, is keeping it to 200 pages, which is a publishing decision. I enjoy very much writing for children because it forces me to own the story that I'm telling. You can't tell a story unless it's really yours. So whether it's Ramayana or Mahabharata, it helps me know the story better before I tell it. So yeah, I love writing for children actually. It's a lot easier than writing for adults. Let me say that. Yeah.
That's true. That's lovely. So should we dive straight into the characters now?
Sure.
So, do you think it was right that goddess Ganga, being a goddess, married a human king and then put him through all the pain of losing 7 of his children? Even if they were vasus, do you think what she did was justified?
Okay, now here's the most important thing about Mahabharata and Ramayana. These are not characters that I've made up. These are characters that have been given to me, right, by a long, long tradition. So what I do in both my in Ramayana and in Mahabharata is, as far as possible, I go back to the Sanskrit text, right, and I check what's going on there. And very often I use dialogue from the Sanskrit text. Very often I use descriptions, images, things like that. So Ganga, like everybody else, was given to me on a platter, right? So what I can do is make characters, to highlight their nicer qualities. So I did try to make Ganga sympathetic. Was she justified in killing her children? Yes, she was, because it was for a so-called higher purpose, right? And I think the question that we need to ask ourselves is, do we understand gods, like Ganga, in the same way that we understand human beings? I cannot imagine that a human woman would get away with killing one child, let alone 7. Yeah? But Ganga's doing it for their own good, as it were. The guy, I feel really sorry for Shantanu, because he can't ask any questions. He's been told not to do that. He's watching this horrible thing year after year after year. He loves this woman, and there's nothing he can do to stop her. And when he does try to stop her, she goes away. I think he's the sad guy in the story. I mean, Ganga's in control. Like many of the women characters in the Mahabharata, they're all very, very strong. So.
Yeah. Speaking of strong women characters, my next question to you is, out of all the wives in the story, who do you think is the strongest? And being an Indian woman, what qualities do you find in this woman that make you feel she is strong?
Ooh. I guess I would have to say Gandhari. Oh, no, wives. Okay. I think that's very important that you notice that most of the women characters in the Mahabharata are wives. Right? There's only Amba, who's not a wife. And the other thing also, which is a little bit distressing, is all the women in the Mahabharata live through their sons.
Yeah, that's true.
That would leave out people like you and me from the great stories. So that is something that I would not like to celebrate about the Mahabharata, that mothers live through their sons. There's barely a daughter in sight, right? After the Pandavas are born, everybody's just interested in the boys. So that's something I would not endorse for any time, let alone our time, which is the 21st century, where women have made great strides. We have to deal with women very differently now than we did even when I was your age. And I'm very grateful that the world has to treat us differently. So, which woman character do I like? I like Gandhari a lot because that determination is just staggering. You know, when she says, "Oh, my husband's blind. Well, I'm gonna blindfold myself."
Yeah.
But you've got to feel for Amba. You know, and
Yeah.
she was just knocked about the world, and she had to take her life in her own hands. She had to um, protect herself. Uh, she's really. So who's yours? Who's your favorite character?
I really like Draupadi because I feel that she's one of the strongest women characters in this entire book. I feel that the mere fact that she's like, I'm gonna get revenge for what was done to me, really makes me see her as like, I can imagine her as a modern day woman today, and I really think I can like look up to her in some sort of way as a character. I really like Draupadi.
But isn't it interesting, Tariqa, that there's so few Indian girls called Draupadi? Lots of them are called Sita, but ain't nobody calling their daughter Draupadi. You know,
That's
maybe they don't want her to have five husbands. But whatever. I mean, there's a, you know, I don't think traditional Indian culture is as supportive as Draupadi as your generation could be. So,
Yeah, that's true. Because our generation, she was sort of like the rebel against all the other wives, should I say. So our generation would really want to become a stronger person and not abide by all the regulations and rules that have been put in set for us.
yeah, yeah. I'm a little troubled by her burning revenge, you know, that bothers me a little bit. I would like to, you know, cleanse myself of anger and, you know, emotions that can lead to disturbance and violence. So I have that problem with Draupadi, but otherwise she's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So my next question to you is, do you think that in times of war, fighting against your own family, no matter the circumstance, is right? And if so, why?
Well, I don't think I'm against war in general. Yeah. So whether you're fighting with your family or you're fighting with your enemy, to me, both are equally horrible. Um, I can't imagine. I cannot imagine what it's like to feel um, so much hatred for a family. I mean, you know, all families, I'm sure even your family, you know, we don't talk to that uncle or that auntie is a bit jealous or, you know, all that khuspus goes on in any case, right? But I don't think those are emotions that actually think, ooh, I could kill them. You know, so the Mahabharata does work on exaggerations. It works particularly on amplified emotions. Um, yeah, so I think my answer to your question is that I'm against war altogether. Um, and I think in Mahabharata, we can see, of course, we can see that war is a problem because they try very, very hard to do all kinds of things to prevent the war. But you know, we're led to believe, oh, Duryodhana did like this, it's all his fault. And all. But Arjuna was doing the same thing. Huh? He was planning, he was getting his weapons, he was getting married to so many women, he was making these alliances. So um, there's an inevitability to the war in Mahabharata, and I think sometimes I think the Mahabharata is an anti-war text, and the best way to convey how ghastly war is, just set it between family members, you know? Because
So that,
otherwise, yeah, you could read the story of, Arey, those guys were wrong, Arey, those guys were wrong, oh, that's a bad country, you know, like we do constantly, right? But if it's within your own family, I mean, you know, they grew up with Drona and Bhishma and Duryodhana and Kripacharya. They have to kill on the battlefield the men who are their teachers, who played with them. Um, I think that's even more devastating than having to kill your cousin. I don't think I could. I don't think I could raise arms against my teacher.
me neither.
Okay?
Like these are the people who like you've grown up with. They might not be your direct family, but they are your family in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So correlating to this question, I have another question. Um, is Krishna justified when he called Arjuna a coward for not wanting to fight against his family?
You know, when he says that thing about don't be a coward, Arjuna, um, I think he's just instigating him. I think he's like, really, because the worst thing you can say to a warrior is that you're a coward. And Arjuna, of course, is the ultimate warrior. I mean, he's trained his whole life to do for this moment, right? So for him to be prodded like that, I mean, I really think at that point Krishna's trying to get to Arjuna's ego, right? And it works. I mean, it takes a long time, and he has to hear the whole Bhagavad Gita, but he does go into war with a renewed commitment and a renewed energy. So I don't think Krishna means that Arjuna is a coward. I mean, I think he knows that Arjuna is a very brave warrior. I think very often of Arjuna as an athlete. You're a football player, okay? So you know what it is to be in the zone, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Arjuna's in the zone as a warrior. That's what he does. And he has good days and he has bad days, but he's never going to be a bad warrior, right? So the issue of cowardice doesn't arise. So I do think that Krishna's just being cheeky, not insulting, So,
Not insulting, but do you feel that Krishna was actually being like a coach, like correlating this to football? Krishna would be his motivation by putting him down to make him strive to be better.
yeah, probably. I mean, you would know this much better than I, being a sports person yourself. But I always think of Arjuna as an athlete. I mean, my great sports hero was Michael Jordan, who used to play for the Chicago Bulls in the 80s and 90s. And I used to watch him obsessively, and you knew when he was in the zone. You just okay, he's getting to that basket. It doesn't matter who's in his way, right? So Arjuna is like that. And as you say, Krishna can be seen as his coach. And if we think, as many people do, that the Bhagavad Gita is a life lesson, then of course Krishna is the coach. Yeah?
Of course. So my next question to you is that when Krishna is talking to Arjun, he says a line, learn to act without being attached to the fruits of your actions. What is your interpretation of this line and what do you feel it teaches children?
Oh goodness. It's the hardest piece of advice I think that anyone can get. I don't think it teaches younger people anything different from what it teaches adults. I don't think that our great stories, whether they're Ramayana or Mahabharata, I don't think they function on different levels. I think what they speak of is understood in the same way by younger and older people. It may, younger people may spend a little more time trying to figure out what it's saying. I think older people should also spend a little more time trying to figure out what it's saying. It's a really, really difficult philosophy to follow, right? Because we are expected to live and behave in the moment only. Yeah? We're not supposed to think about the consequences of our actions. No, excuse me, that's not correct. We're not supposed, we must think of the consequences of our action, but we cannot be attached to what those consequences might be. Right? So even when you and I are having this conversation, we're very aware that we're speaking in a public space, that we're speaking for a particular purpose. Lucky me, the purpose is selling a book. But that is what we are doing, right? So I must respond to you in the moment, very responsibly, and not, oh my God, I sell 100 books. Oh my God, I sell 200 books. Has Tariecka liked my book? That in a very, very small way, I think this is what that philosophy means. So, like yourself, I mean, last week you were doing exams, right?
Yeah.
So, for you as a 14-year-old exam-taking student, you need to just do the best that you can in that exam. Instead of worrying, am I going to get 100%? Am I going to come first in class? Am I going to go to Yale? Am I going to Stanford? No, in the moment. And I think the sort of idea behind that is that if you do your best in the moment, if you act with sincerity and integrity and honesty, then the consequences are going to be good. So I think that's what it means. And, I think older people, younger people, we can all understand this.
Yeah, it's a very important life lesson because people tend to think so much into the future that they kind of forget what they're doing right now. And thinking about the outcome before it even happens and then being disappointed in the end isn't something that children should really want to experience, because this entire generation is really focused on, I'm gonna do this in the future, I'm gonna do this, but they're not enjoying their childhood itself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Or even again, to go back to the sports analogies, I mean, when you play, you know what focus is in that moment,
Yeah.
And if you're shooting, I don't know if you're a forward or what, but if you're shooting, you see the goal, like Arjuna sees simply the eye of the bird, right? And that's what it is, really. That really is what it is. And, I think especially this past year that we've had, with pandemic and lockdown and all like that, it really has forced us to live in the moment. You know, I mean, whatever plans we'd made for the year just completely fell apart. Um, I'm thinking that all the things I wanted to do this year, I'll do next year, but I don't know if I can. So I just have to be here now,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really true. Okay, so my next question to you is, if you could, okay, one second. What do you think Goddess Ganga felt when she saw that Shantanu had married another woman and made her own son give up the throne to complete strangers?
Well, Bhishma decided to do that himself. Shantanu didn't tell him to do it, right? So I think Ganga should probably be proud of him. That he chose to make such an enormous sacrifice for his father. And you know what? I mean, considering the mess all those people make, Dhritarashtra, Pandu and all that, Ganga must be saying, Bhishma, you were so right. Yeah, to stay away from this, to watch it from afar. But of course, Bhishma is problematic because, he could have stopped Draupadi's disrobing.
Yeah.
So all the respect I have for Bhishma is always moderated by, remembering his inaction. And it's I can't say, oh, Bhishma, you're a great guy. I really can't. Yeah.
That's true. But he was a good teacher, if we have to admit. He did make sure that all his children, not his direct children, but every student he taught did come to love him. And
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
he was a great teacher.
Yep.
Okay. So for my next question. On the night before the war began, the commanders of the opposing army met and decided by which rules they would fight. They agreed that there would be no fighting before sunrise and all battles would stop at sunset. No one would attack a warrior who was unarmed or injured. This shows us that the warriors in those times were noble and just. Relating this to the times we are in now, do you feel that our morals and rules are corrupted?
Oh, God, yes. Absolutely. Yeah. It's a, what do you think? Because, I mean, I'm so much older than you. And I've seen a different world and I've lived in a different world. But how do you see the world you're living in? Do you find it corrupt?
I find it extremely corrupt. Like, take the entire Donald Trump, Joe Biden thing, for example. Our politics, our own politicians are so corrupt, and they are the people who are shaping the world that we children today live in. And it's hard for us to take good examples from people who are not good. If they don't give us opportunities to learn from them, then we're going to end up becoming people who are like them.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that
Yeah, please.
our politicians and all of our teachers, um, the people who we look up to, need to take the initiative to make sure that they set a good example for our generation. And the biggest people in the world for us today are the people who are not giving us good examples. So I think it's corrupted the method that we are being to see the world as children.
Yeah. But do you think that your generation will be able to change the world?
I think that because of the amount of pushback that has been given to our generation has already started to change the world, as they say. Um, Generation Z, Generation Z, whatever it's called, they've already started making small changes. Like I can see that in the lockdown itself, many children from my school have started making donations to NGOs, raising money, doing a lot of stuff that can really change the world in the future.
Yeah, I think one of the most remarkable characters of the early 21st century is Greta Thunberg. I mean, that is amazing. You know, she addresses the UN, she takes on Trump. I mean, it's like, yeah, yeah, you have people like her to look to. You know, I mean, she's pretty extreme, and I can believe that some people are put off by her, but she did it. You know, she, yeah.
Okay, so what character traits do you find suitable for Karna, and do you believe that he should have taken the side of his brothers, or do you believe he was right in supporting the Kauravas?
I think Karna's most admired character trait is his loyalty. And we admire him so much because he stayed with Duryodhana. You know, Krishna tells him, his mother comes to him, his mother says, sorry, sorry. And he says, what, sorry, sorry? It's too late now. So I admire him for staying with Duryodhana. I also, I must say, I have a soft spot for Duryodhana. You know, traditionally we're brought up to think, Arey, Kauravas, they're villains. Arey, Duryodhana is the worst guy. No, he's not. He's really honorable. The Kauravas do not break a single rule of war. Right? And the so-called good guys, the Pandavas, break them all. So I find Duryodhana very noble. And I love what he says to Yudhishthira in the end. He said, this is what you want, take it. He said, I laughed, I sang, I loved my wives, my people loved me. And you are getting a scorched earth, take it. I think that's great, you know, he leaves, he dies with everything done.
That's true.
Lived and died honorably, you know.
I have one last question before we go into audience question answers. What is the biggest message you feel children can take away from this book?
You know, I don't like giving children messages, Tariecka. But really, really, what I would like young people to think about, young readers to think about, is the cost of violence and the cost of hatred and the cost of war. Because God knows, in our country as well as in other places, we're facing hatred. Violence is you know, just below the surface. I would really like young people to think about whether that's the kind of world they want to live in.
Yes.
I hope they're going to say, no, I don't want to live in that kind of world, but you know, yeah.
Okay. So I think we should go straight into the questions that our viewers have been asking us. So the first question is by Aditya Sonpal and he's 13. We are taught to revere these characters, but they all have flaws. How can we respect people with flaws?
Well, I'm sorry, is his name Aditya?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Aditya, I think you have sort of answered your own question in the way that you framed it. You said we are taught to revere these characters, yeah. But what do you think for yourself? No, I mean, I think as we enter our teens and get older, this is the biggest question we have to ask ourselves. Do I can I agree with the things that I've been taught, especially about stories? So if you feel these characters are flawed, and they are hugely flawed, then you need to think about how you might respect them or not, and maybe you have a conversation. The people who tell you that these are characters that need to be respected. I think also, respect is something um, that we figure out. It's something that we learn for ourselves. Of course, when our parents tell us, go touch your grandparents' feet and all, that's one thing, right? But if you create like cultural heroes and cultural icons, then I think we need to decide for ourselves, young people, whether or not we can actually respect somebody who does terrible things.
Yeah, that's really true. Okay, so for the second question, you say that Ganga's killing her sons serves a greater purpose. So why does the same logic not apply to Draupadi's revenge or Arjuna's killing his teachers or cousins?
Oh, very good question. Yeah, absolutely. I think we're persuaded that whatever happens in the war, the revenge, Krishna's many manipulations, all the the violations of war rules, all of that is actually okay because it leads to a greater good. All that is bad in the world is destroyed and the world will be reborn. Um, yeah, you're absolutely right. But, I will say this. This is what the text says, right? This is what the Mahabharata story says. And when I decide to retell the story, I have to retell the story the way the story tells itself. It's not up to me to change things. So whether I agree with this or disagree with this, I have to put that aside, no? Because I really think the Mahabharata shows us the most difficult questions. Yeah, what it means to be human, what it means to be good, what do you do when good people do bad things, what do you do when bad people do good things? These are things that we all have to live with, whether we're younger or older or whatever it is. So I feel that the Mahabharata shows us the questions. I'm not sure the Mahabharata gives us the answers, And I think those answers are for each of us to find individually. I'm hoping that's what my Mahabharata will do, that it will make it possible for people like yourself, younger readers, to seek these answers, yeah, for yourselves rather than from tradition or from more, think for yourself. Don't let people tell you what it's saying. Yeah.
That's great. I think we have time for one last question. So, can you talk about a lesser known hero in the Mahabharata whom readers should know more about?
Yuyutsu. I didn't have time to put him into my book. I felt so bad. I mean, I didn't have the space to put him into my book. But he is a Kaurava who fights on the side of the Pandavas because he believes that they are right. So here is a man who goes against his own family, against his own world, against everything that's expected of him because of his conscience. Yeah, I think that's really important. Now, really, whoever asked this question, thank you for asking it, because now I realize I made a terrible mistake in my book by not including Jujutsu. So maybe I'm going to have to write a special Jujutsu book. But yeah, I think Jujutsu is very important because he shows us the power of conscience. Yeah.
So I think that's the last question we have time for today.
Thank you, Tariecka. It's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much for all your conscientious hard work with, figuring out questions to ask and for handling this session so with so much maturity. Good for you. You have an alternative career if football doesn't work, yeah? Evil.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being such a wonderful author to this book. Book has really given me such an insight, and it's made me learn so much that I probably could never have been taught in school, and no other book that has Indian mythology. Like, this is my first Indian mythology book, and I've got to say I love it. And this book is going to definitely make me read more Indian mythology after this. So thank you so much for this session. I've absolutely loved it. I absolutely loved the book, and it was great talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tata Lit Live as well. Thank you for the launch, and thank you for finding me a wonderful conversation companion.
Wow, this was one incredible conversation. Lots of Sitas, but ain't nobody calling their daughters Draupadi today. Something to think about for sure. Thank you, Arshia. Thank you, Tariecka, for this extremely interesting conversation. It has surely brought back so many memories and helped us all to create new ones. To read stories for yourself, order a copy of Arshia's Mahabharata for children today from our bookstore partner, Tata Click. Thank you, our dear audience, for being here today, and a big thank you to our title sponsor, Tata, and session sponsor, Akshara Foundation. Do watch out for other fabulous sessions and workshops that are a part of Little Festival this year. Bye, and have a lovely morning, afternoon, or evening ahead. See you.